Imagine a woman so dangerous to the Nazis that the Gestapo put a 5 million franc bounty on her head. Imagine a glamorous socialite who drank like a sailor, swore like a pirate, and yet slipped through occupied France again and again, untouchable, unpredictable, unstoppable. This was Nancy Grace Augusta Wake, known to her enemies as the White Mouse, and to the Allies as one of the greatest operatives of World War II. My name is Michael Graves. But the people who really knew my family never used that name. In the world my father lived in, identities were flexible, truth was layered, and silence carried more power than words. For 25 years, my father worked in the Secret Services, not the glamorous Hollywood version, but the real one. Dim offices, coded messages, unmarked cars, and operations where a single mistake could rewrite a life forever, before dementia began erasing his memories piece by piece. He handed me something, a worn, leather-bound diary, cracked spine, faded ink, but inside were the things he never dared to say out loud. Names, patterns, warnings, stories of agents who vanished without explanation, and others whose lives were rewritten in official files. Operations labeled successful, even when the truth was far darker. Enemies that were never what they seemed, and secrets so strange I still question whether he intended anyone to read them. Some of what I'll tell you today comes from public records, but much of it connects to the patterns described in that diary, patterns my father saw again and again. And if you think this already sounds dramatic, wait until you hear what comes next. Because every time I thought I'd found the most shocking detail, the next page proved me wrong. I'm not sharing this to create fear. I'm sharing it because real truth is never clean, simple, or familiar. And the deeper I went into his diary, the more I realized that the official story almost never matches reality. Today, we're uncovering the hidden reality behind the fearless White Mouse who outwitted the Gestapo, Nancy Grace Augusta Wake. Not the soft version told to the public, the real version, the one buried beneath politics, classified archives, and forgotten reports. Most people think they know this story. They don't. In this video, you will discover truths that don't just challenge the legend, they rewrite it entirely. And if the beginning shocks you, wait until the end. Because the last detail is the only one my father underlined twice in red. If you want to see those hidden pages come to life, make sure to hit subscribe, because the next chapter may be the most dangerous one yet. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake was born on August 30th, 1912 in Wellington, New Zealand, but her story did not stay confined to the quiet landscapes of her birthplace. By the time she was 2, her family had relocated to Sydney, Australia, settling into a life of upheaval and reinvention. Her childhood was not easy. Her father eventually left, and her mother struggled alone with 6 children. This instability shaped Nancy early. She grew up fiercely independent, determined not to be bound by anyone's expectations. At 16, she ran away from home. With a heart full of ambition, she became a nurse, not because she lacked options, but because she saw it as a way out, a first step toward the independence she craved. She was resolute and unafraid, and even in those early years, there was something about her that hinted at a greater destiny. When Nancy inherited 200 pounds from an aunt, she did not squander it. Instead, she used it to travel to New York, London, and eventually Paris. In Paris in the 1930s, she worked as a journalist for Hearst newspapers. She covered the city's glamorous coffee houses and smoky night spots, but her reporting soon took a darker turn. She began witnessing the horrors of Europe's political transformation firsthand. It was in Vienna and Berlin that Nancy saw the true face of Nazism. She watched Jews harassed in the streets, roving Nazi gangs brutalizing civilians, and the ominous rise of the brown shirts. These experiences left an indelible mark on her. She later recalled being haunted by images of cruelty and by a thought that would become her iron resolve. If I can do something, one day, I will. Her personal life seemed to be heading toward peace. In 1937, she met Henri Fiocca, a French industrialist, and the two married in Marseille in 1939. On the surface, it was a glamorous life. Dinners in elegant homes, champagne, caviar, the social circles of France's upper class. But underneath, the world was shifting dangerously. When Germany invaded France in 1940, Nancy did not flee. She stayed in Marseille. She bought an ambulance with Henri's money. She drove wounded soldiers, refugees, and civilians to safety, working day after day, witnessing unspeakable suffering. She refused to be a bystander. She became part of the resistance. She joined what would later become the Pat O'Leary Line, helping Allied airmen and Jewish families escape over the mountains. Here is what they do not teach you in spy school. Bravery often begins as a refusal to let fear define you. Nancy's war was not born from glory. It was born from moral conviction. She knew the cost, but she also believed the stakes were higher than her own life. Within months, her work made her a target. The Gestapo noticed her. They tapped her phone. They intercepted her mail. And they gave her a name she would carry for the rest of her life: the White Mouse. By 1943, the price on her head had grown to 5 million francs. The Gestapo was offering a fortune for her capture, proof that she had become far more than a courier. She had become a symbol. And with that symbol came danger, unlike anything she had faced. But Nancy was not going to run yet. She had only just begun. The streets of Marseille in 1940 were no longer the sunny promenades of Nancy's early life. Occupation had transformed the city into a place of quiet terror. Soldiers marched with relentless precision. Black uniformed Gestapo officers watched every corner. Ordinary citizens whispered in shadows, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Yet in this darkness, Nancy found purpose. She realized that surviving was no longer enough. She had to act. Her first steps into the resistance were cautious, almost imperceptible. She drove her ambulance through checkpoints, carrying injured soldiers and frightened refugees. She memorized patrol patterns, observed the subtle gestures of informants, and began keeping mental maps of safe houses. Every day was a balancing act between ordinary life and extraordinary risk. A single mistake could expose her, or worse, those she sought to protect. But here is what they do not tell you in intelligence school. Fear, if harnessed, can become a weapon. Nancy learned to use it like a shield and a compass, guiding her through impossible choices. By 1941, Nancy's involvement deepened. She became part of the Pat O'Leary Line, a network dedicated to smuggling Allied airmen and Jewish families out of occupied France. Each mission was a gamble against fate itself. Crossing the mountains into Spain or slipping hidden refugees past checkpoints demanded not just courage, but ingenuity. Every mission began with meticulous planning, yet ended in uncertainty. Even when she succeeded, the sense of accomplishment was fleeting. The shadow of the Gestapo was always close, always looming. The more Nancy worked, the more audacious she became. She devised disguises, forged documents, and memorized routes with a precision that impressed even seasoned operatives. Yet danger was never theoretical. One evening, a man she had trusted for months disappeared without a trace. He had been captured by the Gestapo. Nancy realized that betrayal could come from the most unexpected places, and in that instant, she understood the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. Her actions drew attention. By late 1942, whispers of her exploits had reached Gestapo headquarters. They called her the White Mouse, a creature clever, elusive, impossible to trap. The nickname was both a warning and a mark of respect. Nancy did not take it lightly. She knew the Gestapo would stop at nothing to capture her. Every day became a game of shadows, with her life hanging in the balance. Even so, she pressed on. She could not ignore the faces of the people she saved, nor the cries of those she could not. Each success emboldened her, but each loss reminded her that one misstep could end everything. The tension was relentless, but Nancy's resolve was unbreakable. She had a mission greater than herself, and she refused to yield. And then one night, everything changed. A coded message arrived that would propel her into a confrontation unlike any she had faced. The full scope of her role in the resistance was about to be revealed. But what that message contained, and the choice she would have to make, would test the limits of courage, intelligence, and survival. If you think surviving the streets of Marseille was dangerous, wait until you see what came next. Nancy Grace Wake was about to face a challenge that would define her legend forever. When Nancy Wake finally escaped France in 1943, it was not by choice, but necessity. The Gestapo's noose was tightening. Her name, White Mouse, had become infamous, and she topped their most wanted list. She fled via Spain and reached Britain. London was not a refuge. It was a new beginning. There, she was recruited by the British Special Operations Executive, the secret wartime organization whose mission was sabotage, espionage, and supporting the resistance across Europe. With her codename Hélène, she underwent rigorous training including parachuting, hand-to-hand combat, wireless communication, and demolition. Her training reports described her as a very good and fast shot with exceptional fieldcraft, and she put male trainees to shame. On the night of April 29th to 30th, 1944, Nancy and Major John Farmer parachuted into the Auvergne region of central France. The drop was anything but smooth. Nancy's parachute got tangled in a tree, leaving her dangling high above the ground. When a Maquis fighter greeted her, he said, "I hope all trees in France bear such beautiful fruit." She replied with her typical blunt defiance, "Cut out that French shit and get me down." That moment marked the real beginning of her role as a resistance leader. She was tasked with organizing the Maquis fighters in the Auvergne under Colonel Gaspard, coordinating parachute drops of arms and distributing resources. But here's what they rarely tell you. The French groups were suspicious of her at first, and many resistance leaders did not trust London's money or her motives. She carried money and weapons, but also insisted that the Maquis prove themselves. She would only distribute funds if they demonstrated discipline and commitment. The balancing act was delicate. Nancy argued, negotiated, drank with Maquis leaders, and pressured them to coordinate their attacks. Under her leadership, the Maquis of Auvergne grew from a few hundred fighters to several thousand by the summer of 1944. Her role was crucial. She was not just a courier, but a commander, a strategist, and a liaison at the heart of the fight. Yet danger continued to loom. Nazi reprisals were brutal, and the Maquis' success attracted severe counterattacks. One particular German offensive in June 1944 targeted a plateau above Chaudes Egg, where Nancy and her fighters knew they were badly outnumbered by tens of thousands of German troops, artillery, and aircraft. In a tense meeting, Nancy convinced her comrades to withdraw strategically rather than perish in a suicidal stand. Under her coordination, they executed a fighting withdrawal under cover of darkness, preserving their strength for future actions. Even as she negotiated these high-stakes decisions, Nancy personally moved between Maquis units. She carried radio equipment, money, and ammunition. She shielded her fighters, encouraged them, and calmed them. And she did this all while knowing that betrayal could come from anywhere, from collaborators, from informants, and from within their own ranks. As she watched the sky at night waiting for another supply drop, she knew the real test was not just in survival. The fight ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand cunning, resilience, and a will that matched the fiercest of the enemy. By June 1944, the weight of responsibility on Nancy's shoulders was immense. German forces were mobilizing to crush the resistance in Auvergne, and her Maquis fighters were vulnerable. The parachute drops of weapons and money were their lifeline, but only if the caches made it to the right units. Nancy's task was not just to distribute arms, but to direct them, to pick which Maquis would fight and which would hide until the moment was right. One night, disaster struck. During a German raid, Nancy's wireless operator was forced to destroy his codebooks to prevent their capture. Suddenly, she lost contact with London. Without codes, there could be no more drops. Without drops, the Maquis would run out of arms. Without arms, their fight was doomed. Nancy made a decision that sounded almost impossible. She borrowed a bicycle and set off on a mission that would become legendary. With no radio and no support, she cycled across German-held territory, approximately 500 kilometers, to the nearest Allied transmitter. The journey would take her through checkpoints, under the constant threat of patrols, through towns controlled by the enemy. She rode for 72 hours without proper rest, living off sheer adrenaline, determination, and the flickering hope that she could reconnect her fighters with London. Her legs burned, sleep eluded her, and she carried the weight of responsibility for every Maquis soul relying on her success. When she finally reached her destination, she found the radio and sent the crucial message. The Maquis must withdraw, reorganize, and prepare for the storm of war that was coming. Her return trip was no less dangerous. She cycled back into the heart of the Maquis, physically shattered but spiritually unbroken. She embodied their collective will. Her extraordinary ride ensured that the resistance could continue to fight even in the face of overwhelming odds. But here's what many people don't know. After that ride, she did not rest. She went straight back into guerrilla operations. She guided fighters, coordinated supply drops, and helped ambush convoys. Under her leadership, the Maquis in Auvergne hit the Germans hard, more than any other region. One of her most daring actions came when she led her fighters in a raid on Gestapo headquarters in Montluçon. In a coordinated strike, they drove cars into the building, threw grenades, opened fire, and fled in seconds. In one account, she personally confronted a sentry and used a judo-style chop to silence him, preventing an alarm. If you think she was only a strategist, think again. Nancy was a fighter, a saboteur, and a leader on the front lines. And yet, danger was never far away. Every mission came with risk, reprisals, betrayal, and capture. But for her, retreat was never an option. Summer 1944 brought both hope and tragedy. The Allied invasion of Normandy had begun. Resistance groups across France surged forward. Nancy and her Maquis fighters in Auvergne were preparing for their most dangerous mission yet. They were to support the Allies and coordinate actions during the Allies' push into occupied France. Resistance operations intensified. The Maquis ambushed German convoys, destroyed railways, and sabotaged supply lines. Nancy remained central, coordinating arms drops, planning raids, and rallying fighters. Her leadership was fierce, determined, and increasingly critical. But in the heat of victory, she received the news she had dreaded for years. Her husband, Henry Fiocca, had been captured by the Gestapo. She learned that he had been tortured, refused to betray her, and eventually executed. The grief was devastating. Learning of his death felt like a betrayal by fate, one she carried silently even while fighting for freedom. Even that pain did not stop her. On August 25th, 1944, as Paris was being liberated, Nancy marched into the city with her Maquis fighters. She had trusted her body and mind to lead them, and against the odds, they made it. But she did not walk into celebration unscarred. The cost of victory was personal, and her triumph was shadowed by loss. After the war, Nancy did not vanish into obscurity. She worked for the British Air Ministry Intelligence Department, serving in embassies in Paris and Prague. She attempted politics in Australia, running for parliament, but her restless spirit remained. Yet even in peace, the war's weight remained. She struggled with the memories of raids, the faces of comrades lost, and the knowledge that she had survived while so many did not. She carried both pride and guilt. If you think she was only a strategist, think again. Nancy was a fighter, a saboteur, and a leader on the front lines. And yet, danger was never far away. Every mission came with risk, reprisals, betrayal, and capture. But for her, retreat was never an option. Nancy Wake's bravery did not go unrecognized. By the end of the war, she had become one of the most highly decorated women in Allied intelligence. She was awarded the George Medal by Britain, the Medal of Freedom by the United States, the Médaille de la Résistance, the Croix de Guerre 3 times, and the Légion d'honneur from France. But medals do not erase scars. After the war, Nancy refused glamour. She returned briefly to civilian life, then worked in British intelligence before finally settling in Australia. She later divorced, remarried, and in 1985 published her autobiography, The White Mouse, which became a bestseller. She often said that her greatest regret was not the battles she had fought, but those she could not stop. Her husband's death haunted her. She carried survivor's guilt. Yet she never regretted the choice she made, to fight, to act, to risk everything for freedom. In her final years, she returned to Europe. When she died in 2011, aged 98, her wish was simple: to have her ashes scattered over the hills around Montluçon, the very plateau where she once led Maquis fighters and parachuted into danger. Her death was peaceful, but her legacy is anything but silent. Today, she is remembered not as a myth, but as a woman who defied expectation, embraced risk, and redefined courage. Sometimes the story you think you know, a daring spy, a resistance heroine, is nothing compared to the truth. Nancy Wake was more than the White Mouse. She was a force of nature. Share this video with someone who loves true spy stories. Every detail you just heard is real, documented, and almost unbelievable. Nancy Wake's courage reminds us that ordinary people can defy impossible odds when they refuse to be bystanders. Subscribe. The next page from the diary might shock you even more. Her story is not just history. It is a lesson in bravery, resilience, and the hidden cost of freedom. Sometimes the story you think you know is nothing compared to the story you were never meant to hear.